A grain of sodium chloride strikes the ceramic edge of your dinner plate. In that microscopic fraction of a second, a perfectly symmetrical crystalline lattice of positively and negatively charged ions violently halts its descent. You see a simple seasoning. You are actually looking at one of the most potent thermal batteries on the surface of the Earth. We have been psychologically conditioned to view our kitchen cabinets as mere storage for flavor, reducing ancient earth-shaping minerals to culinary afterthoughts. This is a profound physical illusion. Right now, sitting quietly in the dark of your pantry, exists a dense, crystalline substance capable of capturing, storing, and radiating enough thermal energy to keep an entire room warm through the freezing depths of winter for a fraction of a single dollar. There is no combustion involved in this process. There is no reliance on a fragile electrical grid. There is just the raw, unyielding mechanics of planetary chemistry. Humanity has leveraged this precise atomic architecture for millennia, manipulating it to survive brutal, unforgiving climates. Yet, in our modern era of automated climate control and digitized thermostats, this foundational knowledge has been completely abandoned. Understand the thermodynamic mechanism I am about to explain, and you will never look at a salt shaker the same way again. To comprehend the magnitude of this, you must first look at a localized example of manipulated chemistry. Think of the last time you found yourself in the freezing cold and activated a chemical hand warmer. You retrieve the small plastic pouch from your coat pocket. Inside floats a clear liquid and a small metal disc. You bend the disc. Instantly, a shockwave of nucleation rips through the liquid, snapping it into a rigid, opaque crystal. In seconds, it emits a startling, intense heat that burns against your freezing skin. You accept this warmth without question, yet there is no hidden battery inside that pouch. There is no burning filament. There is no combustible fuel. You are witnessing a violent exothermic reaction. The liquid is a supersaturated solution, and when you snap the metal disc, you force the molecules to align, aggressively expelling stored latent energy into the surrounding environment as it crystallizes. Common table salt operates on a remarkably similar energetic principle when its physical properties are manipulated correctly. It does not just sit inertly in a glass jar. It is a highly volatile participant in the physics of your home. It reacts aggressively with moisture. It reacts with extreme thermal fluctuations. It possesses a devastating capacity to absorb environmental energy, hold it securely within its atomic bonds, and expel it over time. When combined with dense, inexpensive earthly materials, you force a slow, methodical release of this energy. You weaponize the chemistry. To truly grasp why this mineral possesses such immense structural power, you must examine its historical and geological origins. Salt is the evaporated memory of ancient, vanished oceans. It is hauled from crushed, dried seabeds buried thousands of feet beneath the Earth's crust, compressed by tectonic weight over millions of years. Thousands of years ago, humanity recognized that this crystal was not merely a luxury, but a fundamental tool of biological survival. Roman centurions were famously compensated in rations of salt, birthing the very etymology of the modern word salary. It preserved dead tissue from microscopic rot, allowing armies to march across continents without starving. Wars of immense scale and brutality were waged solely to secure its deposits. Entire global trade networks, spanning harsh deserts and treacherous mountain ranges, were carved through unforgiving terrain simply to move this specific molecular compound from one hemisphere to another. Why did human empires bleed for a rock? It comes down entirely to its atomic architecture. Sodium chloride is a binary compound. It consists of one atom of sodium and one atom of chlorine, bound together by an electrostatic attraction so incredibly tight and perfect that it defies ordinary degradation. When this rigid cubic lattice interacts with external energy inputs, specifically extreme applied heat or chemical hydration, that stored atomic tension is forced to shift. The kinetic energy from a heat source is captured, held tightly within the rapid vibration of the ionic bonds, and eventually released as measurable, radiant heat. This is not a theoretical hypothesis. This is an absolute physical certainty. It is tracked by thermal imaging cameras. It is utilized by structural engineers to stabilize the ambient temperatures of massive industrial facilities. And right now, as the global infrastructure of natural gas pipelines and electrical grids falters under skyrocketing geopolitical costs, Regular citizens are being forced to remember what their ancestors knew instinctively. In the brutal, isolated winters of rural Europe, the high altitudes of the Andes, and the deep, unforgiving snowdrifts of Central Asia, indigenous populations and rural families have utilized salt-based heat storage for centuries. They did not require a degree in thermodynamics to understand it. They observed a physical truth, codified it through the brutal trial and error of survival, and passed it down across generations. The method worked. It kept human tissue from freezing when the ambient temperature dropped below survivable thresholds. But as the 20th century progressed, we laid down millions of miles of gas pipelines and flooded our homes with cheap, convenient electric resistance heaters. This ancient physiological safety net was discarded. The knowledge was buried under layers of modern comfort. We outsourced our warmth to centralized corporations. We traded our independent resilience for a monthly utility bill. We forgot. And now, as energy grids strain under the weight of modern demand, and utility bills dictate whether working-class families can afford to stay warm, the population is desperately searching for alternatives. The answer they seek has been sitting patiently in their kitchen cupboards the entire time. You may understand that a mineral absorbs thermal energy, but you are likely questioning how a static pile of crystals alters the atmospheric temperature of a human habitat. The answer lies not in the crystal alone, but in the structural architecture you build around it. To extract the latent power of this mineral, you must construct a deliberate thermodynamic system. The foundational law of this system is thermal mass. Observe the physical world. A thin sheet of manufactured polymer subjected to an intense thermal load will heat rapidly. Remove the heat, and atmospheric convection strips the energy away in minutes. Now consider a thick masonry wall exposed to direct solar radiation. The dense molecular structure absorbs the kinetic energy slowly, drawing it deep into its core. When the sun sets and the ambient temperature plummets, the wall bleeds that captured warmth back into the freezing air for hours. Salt, when prepared with precise intent, is your masonry. It grips thermal energy with devastating efficiency and releases it with excruciating slowness. That deceleration is the exact physical mechanism required to survive a sub-zero night. The mechanics become even more profound when we observe highly engineered variations of this compound. Dr. Mohammed Farid at the University of Auckland has exhaustively documented a class of substances known as phase change materials. Certain salt compounds, specifically salt hydrates, operate as the most potent naturally occurring phase change batteries on the planet. A salt hydrate is simply a sodium chloride molecule with water molecules chemically locked to its structure. When you introduce immense heat, the lattice breaks down. The solid melts into a liquid state, consuming a colossal volume of latent energy to sever the atomic bonds. When the ambient temperature cools, the liquid recrystallizes into a solid. As the bonds reform, that exact volume of energy is aggressively expelled back into the environment. It is thermodynamic symmetry. While standard table salt does not melt in your kitchen oven, its dense, crystalline architecture mimics this storage capacity on a highly localized scale. Consider the metric of specific heat capacity. Water possesses a specific heat capacity of roughly 4.18 joules per gram per degree Celsius. It is a formidable liquid battery, but it flashes its heat away quickly into the open air. Dense salt configurations bypass this limitation. They capture massive amounts of thermal energy and refuse to surrender it instantly. This exact thermal defiance is why massive solar arrays in the Mojave Desert do not rely on lithium batteries. They focus the sun's radiation into vast, insulated silos of molten salt. When the Earth rotates away from the sun and darkness falls, the boiling salt continues to drive the massive steam turbines. The grid stays alive. You are simply replicating this industrial physics on your kitchen stove. Here is the exact physical procedure your ancestors utilized. You acquire a substantial volume of coarse sodium chloride. You must use at least 1 kilogram. Thermal mass requires physical density. You pour the crystals into a heavy iron vessel. You expose the base of the vessel to an intense direct heat source for 20 minutes. You stir the mass slowly. You will not boil it. You will not burn it. You simply force absolute thermal saturation into the ionic lattice. Once the salt achieves maximum temperature, you execute the transfer. You pour the violently hot crystals into a dense ceramic or clay chamber. You seal the lid. You wrap the exterior of the chamber in thick, fibrous textiles to dictate the rate of thermal escape. You place the construct in the center of your sleeping quarters. The salt will slowly, imperceptibly, radiate thermal energy into the surrounding air molecules. The ambient temperature of the room will stabilize. It will hold that temperature for 8 continuous hours. You sleep through the winter. We must also examine the financial physics of this reaction. A standard 1500-watt electrical resistance heater draws a continuous, massive load from the power grid. Running this device for a single 8-hour cycle bleeds over $2 from your bank account. Multiply this parasitic draw over a 5-month winter, and a single room consumes hundreds of dollars of your labor-earned wealth. The alternative defies modern economic extraction. Your initial capital investment is $2 for a kilogram of raw earth mineral. The thermal charge requires mere pennies of natural gas or electrical induction. You utilize a brief, violent burst of primary energy to pack the battery. The crystalline structure performs the sustained thermodynamic labor for the remainder of the night. The economic efficiency is absolute. Before you execute this thermal transfer, you must respect the physical forces you are unleashing. Thermal density is entirely unforgiving. When you elevate the temperature of a dense, crystalline mass to these extremes, you are dealing with concentrated kinetic energy that seeks equilibrium with aggressive, dangerous speed. You must select a containment vessel structurally capable of withstanding sustained, localized heat. Do not use flimsy synthetic polymers. They will undergo rapid molecular degradation, outgas toxic chemical fumes, and melt into a viscous burning slag upon your floorboards. Do not use industrially blown, thin silicate glass. The uneven thermal expansion across the thin walls will cause catastrophic structural failure, violently shattering the vessel and deploying boiling crystals across your room. You must utilize a thick ceramic chamber, cast iron, or dense fired clay. These materials share a similar dense atomic structure with the salt, allowing them to absorb the initial thermal shock and temper the radiation curve. Place this dense thermal battery on an isolating foundation, a slab of cured slate, a thick cut of dense oak, or a fired ceramic tile. This prevents rapid conductive heat loss directly into your floorboards, forcing the energy to radiate upward into the atmospheric gases of your room. Furthermore, you do not leave an active, newly constructed thermal mass unobserved. During your initial cycle, you must remain awake and vigilant for the first 60 minutes. Hover your hand exactly 3 inches above the textile wrapping. Map the radiation curve with your own nervous system. Verify the perimeter is completely isolated from vulnerable biology children whose skin lacks the thickness to withstand accidental contact, or domestic animals drawn to the sudden, intense heat source. You must respect the mass. Safety is an absolute law. You could, theoretically, attempt this thermodynamic manipulation with other earthly matter. Researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's Department of Materials Science have exhaustively mapped the thermal retention capabilities of nearly every common terrestrial substance. Silicon dioxide common sand is dense and holds thermal energy, but its granular, irregular microscopic gaps allow too much atmospheric intrusion, dissipating the heat prematurely. Dense, igneous rocks from your garden absorb heat effectively, but their solid, unyielding mass creates unpredictable internal thermal gradients that can violently crack under rapid heating. Liquid water is universally recognized as a formidable thermal battery due to its high specific heat. However, water is a highly active fluid dynamic system. As it heats, it creates aggressive internal convection currents, constantly churning the hotter molecules to the surface, where they instantly bleed energy into the colder air. It flashes its heat away violently. Sodium chloride occupies a perfect, uncompromising thermodynamic anomaly. Because it is a densely packed crystalline powder, it entirely eliminates internal convection. The energy is locked firmly within the static ionic lattice. It possesses the exact density required to absorb substantial kinetic energy, the exact atomic immobility to stagger its release, and the exact geological abundance to render any economic argument entirely void. It is the perfect battery. Let us run the mathematical parameters of this thermal exchange one final time, because the economic physics are just as brutal as the biological ones. In the modern grid, forcing a standard 1,000 500-watt electric resistance heater to push back the freezing air for 8 continuous hours is an act of sheer financial hemorrhage. The resistance coils burn through electrical current, costing you roughly $2.50 every single night, depending on the localized pricing algorithms of your regional utility provider. That appears to be a negligible extraction, but multiply that localized parasitic draw over 30 days, and $50 is silently siphoned from your labor-earned wealth just to maintain the ambient temperature of a single isolated room. Project that across a 5-month winter season. $375 vaporized into the atmosphere, exchanged for a fleeting comfort that vanishes the second the power grid falters. The thermodynamic alternative defies this modern economic extraction entirely. Your initial capital investment is roughly $3 for a kilogram of raw, coarse earth mineral. That lattice is infinitely reusable. The thermal charge requires a mere fraction of a cent in natural gas or electrical induction. You utilize a brief, violent 20-minute burst of primary energy to pack the thermal battery. The crystalline structure performs the sustained thermodynamic labor for the remainder of the night in absolute silence. The economic efficiency is not just superior. It is devastating. There is a deeply unsettling reality hidden within this forgotten thermodynamic process, one that requires your absolute attention. When a massive, interconnected electrical infrastructure dictates your baseline biological survival, you are completely subjugated by its existence. The abandonment of this foundational chemical knowledge was not an organic human evolution. It was the natural byproduct of a society seduced by the dangerous illusion of infinite, cheap, centralized power. We outsourced our bodily survival to distant power plants, volatile geopolitical supply chains, and fragile copper wires. Modern energy cartels profit directly from your thermodynamic ignorance. They build the pipeline. They control the pressure valve. You pay the ransom. Look globally. Right now, across the faltering edges of the modern grid, hundreds of millions of human beings are confronting profound energy insecurity. As centralized power grids fail under extreme weather anomalies, as geopolitical conflicts sever international natural gas lines, as aging infrastructure buckles beneath the weight of relentless modern demand, as monthly utility extraction outpaces working-class wages, the systems are breaking. But the crystalline structure of sodium chloride has not changed. Its electrostatic bonds remain absolutely unbroken. And deep in the rural valleys of Eastern Europe, across the high-altitude plateaus of South America, and within the disconnected fringes of South Asia, families are quietly bypassing the grid. They are not waiting for corporate salvation or benevolent government intervention. They are manipulating local chemistry. They are sharing this unpatented, unmonopolized thermal knowledge across generational lines. They are surviving. Understanding this history is not a theoretical exercise. It is biological insurance. Systems fail. Prices spiral. Winters strike with unprecedented brutality. The individual who knows 3 distinct physical mechanisms to alter the ambient temperature of their environment is in a fundamentally different paradigm of existence than the individual who only knows how to adjust a digital thermostat. Knowledge is not merely interesting trivia. Knowledge is sovereign power. Tonight, sever your reliance on the grid. Lower your primary digital thermostat by exactly 5 degrees. Extract 1,000 grams of raw sodium chloride from your pantry. Heat the mass until the kinetic radiation burns against your skin from 3 inches away. Seal it in thick clay, isolate it with dense wool, and place it directly in the center of your sleeping quarters. In the silent, freezing dark of the night, you will feel the slow, methodical warmth radiating outward, pressing against the cold. And you will realize the profound truth. It is not just a simple seasoning halting its descent on a dinner plate. It is an ancient ocean, holding back the winter.